Hello, everybody. Welcome into Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have the rest of the Dog Nation team here tonight. Connor Riley, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel. We'll do a lot of things over the course of our few minutes together, looking at the first half of the season, the SEC, what's yet to come the rest of the year, obviously what's in store for Georgia on Saturday when it takes on the Kentucky Wildcats, and a little bit of what Georgia needs to do to qualify for a rematch against Alabama in the SEC championship game and have a chance of winning that game when it's played later on. We'll cover all of those topics here over the course of the next few minutes. Obviously, in various conversations we've had on the air this week, I've heard from each of you about your feelings on Georgia-Kentucky. You've all told me that you think Georgia wins the game on Saturday and wins it somewhat convincingly. So in a moment, I want to find out from you specifically why you are that confident about Georgia in this game on Saturday. Before we get to that, I do want to address what has been the hot topic really for the last couple of weeks, the status of the Georgia quarterback situation. It seems certainly true, at least for Saturday once again. Stetson Bennett will remain entrenched as the Georgia starter, and curiosity turns to, well, how well will he play in that role, and will he do enough to quiet some of the noise that has surrounded him over the course of the last couple of weeks since his last game there against Alabama. So, Connor, let me start with you on this. How do you expect Stetson Bennett to play against Kentucky on Saturday?
Probably he's not going to satisfy everyone, and I don't expect him to put up big yardage numbers or great passing numbers. This Kentucky team, there's obviously questions about their offense and what they're able to do. But in the last 3 weeks, 0 touchdown passes given up. They've intercepted 9 passes. And in that I don't expect him to put – it's still a very good Kentucky secondary. I don't expect him to throw for 300 yards, to look like how everyone is going to want him to look up or how to look. So I still think after this week, there's going to still be those sort of lingering questions about Stetson Bennett.
Jeff, what about you? How do you think you play Saturday?
I guess I would say the number would probably be a solid B effort. I think Georgia definitely doesn't want to have him run around. I think Stetson will probably deliver something like 15 out of 25, 190 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, something like that. Maybe 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I don't know if he'll press the ball downfield. Maybe he'll just check things down. I think really the boilerplate you want to see from Stetson Bennett is you want to see what Jake Fromm looked like in a lot of those Georgia-Kentucky games, except when there's a monsoon outside and no one can possibly throw the football.
Mike, what do you think? Stetson Bennett on Saturday, what are your expectations for him?
I think he'll be efficient. I think the fact that Georgia will be able to run the ball helps him out tremendously. At least I think Georgia will be able to run the ball based on what Missouri did with 220 yards on the ground. And that sets up the play-action game. So I look for an efficient performance, maybe like a 17-24, 270 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns.
That's a pretty good game, though, right? I mean, I think what that leads me to is, you know, I hear all of you speak, and I've obviously talked to Georgia fans about this a while too. I think it's sort of hard to define a little bit what it is that a good game for Stetson Bennett would be. For instance, I know what a Trevor Lawrence good game is. It's as high as the numbers can go. Mac Jones this season, the SEC has been a little bit of that too. We would all, I think, agree that Stetson Bennett's not in that category right now. But Connor, if Stetson Bennett played on Saturday, what Mike just suggested, couple touchdowns, 270-ish yards passing, finds a way to avoid, some of the costly turnovers he had against Alabama. I'm not telling you it's Stetson Bennett for Heisman time, but that ought to quiet some of the criticism he's received if he's playing at least that well.
I still don't think so. I think this fan base right now, they just, if his name was Brandon Bennett and he were 3 inches taller, I think it'd be a very different story. But I think just given what they saw against Alabama, how Georgia measures its sort of self to Alabama, that's just what fans want to see right now. So unless he does have, I think, that Trevor Lawrence type game, I just don't think that's going to satisfy anyone. But to what Mike and Jeff brought up, if he doesn't turn the ball over, I think that's a good game for him, because you saw in their wins, he hasn't turned the ball over and he's looked pretty good doing it. Against Alabama, he had some positives in that first half, but in the second half, he started turning the ball over, and that's when I think things got off the rails for him there.
So I'm a little bit weird in this. I know a lot of our audience won't agree with me on this, and a lot of you probably won't either. But, if you look at Bennett this year, he has thrown some balls that could have been intercepted against Alabama. Some of those throws turned out to be intercepted. I'm a little bit okay with some of that if it's like it was in Tennessee, where he's trying to force the ball deep down the field to George Pickens. I think we would all say that Georgia hasn't gotten the ball to Pickens enough. That's really about the only way you can do that right now is just say, all right, let me see if he can go get this one. I'm going to toss it up in the air. Ball could have been picked. It wasn't against Alabama. He had a couple of interceptions that didn't necessarily have to be, that turned out to be. That's just kind of the way that it goes. So I'm more interested in judging Bennett, in other words, by the big throws that he makes, more so than the mistakes that he avoids. I could live with an interception if he finds a way to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns. I don't necessarily want to turn him into, and this is the phrase we've kicked around on Dog Nation Daily a lot this week, Jeff. I'm not looking to turn Stetson Bennett into game manager, a guy who plays it so safe that he never throws a pick, but he also never makes a big throw. I can live with an interception because Georgia has a good defense. I just need Bennett to make some big throws and get these Georgia receivers more involved in the game. That's really what I want to judge him on, more so than what he does do as opposed to what he avoids.
But I just think with this one, in terms of a quarterback confidence meter, I think Georgia's in a no-win situation. One thing to think about with this Kentucky game is I believe Missouri needed to run the ball about 62 times to get those 220 yards. So at least they put up a big front in terms of making it hard for the opponent to rush the ball. What I mean by that is I don't know if Georgia could get a false positive out of a great Stetson Bennett game. I want each of you gentlemen to answer this honestly. Let's say Stetson goes 27 out of 33 for 345 and 4 touchdowns. Georgia maybe only has a piddling 150 yards on the ground or so. Does anybody believe that Georgia's offense is turning the corner, or is that just Georgia overpowering Kentucky?
I mean, I'd be thrilled if those were the numbers. I mean, I'm not always great at doing math in my head, but those numbers sound pretty good to me, Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be impressive. I don't think Kentucky's defense is really that bad. I mean, I think they are pretty good at the line of scrimmage, but I think I'm kind of with Jeff on this one. We're not really gonna feel too comfortable with the Georgia offense till they beat Florida. Let's face it. It doesn't matter what they do against Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky just got beat down pretty good by Missouri. Regardless of whether Stetson throws 20 passes or 35 passes. I think nothing short of JT Daniels coming off the bench and looking good would make Georgia fans really feel really good right now.
Mike, do you think more than one quarterback plays on Saturday?
I would have said that about other games too, though, Brandon. I mean, and I understand it because you want to get Stetson as much work as possible. If he's going to be the guy, I think it depends on how he plays. I mean, if he stumbles, if we're looking at a 13-6 game at halftime, I could see Kirby making a move.
What would that move be?
Yeah, the question would be, who would he go with? I mean, if Dwan's been taking the reps with the twos, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Because Dwan was the number 1 guy and played 6 series, and we haven't seen him again. And Stetson threw 3 interceptions against Alabama. So I guess it would just depend on the game circumstance. I really don't know. Kirby surprised me a couple times this year.
What do you think, Connor? Do you think more than one quarterback has any chance of playing on Saturday?
I would say a chance, yeah. But ultimately, I think with everything we've heard from Kirby and everything we've heard behind the scenes, it feels like this is still Stetson's job, and Stetson's going to be the guy. I don't think they're going to insert a quarterback and see how these things are going to look. I think they still believe that this is Stetson's team, and Stetson is the guy to lead them on Saturday against Kentucky.
Jeff, give me a final thought on this about where you think Daniels and Mathis and the other quarterbacks fit into this discussion right now.
Yeah, it's funny. We wondered if Dwan was ever going to be a package guy for red zone or goal line or short yardage, and now he's been relegated from those duties as well. I think the way we see 2 quarterbacks, the most likely, just to put this out here for the record, would be when Georgia's up 31-0 in the third quarter or fourth quarter, and then Dwan gets some fresh reps up there in Kentucky.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out. It's Cover 4 Live. It's presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Jeff Sintel, Mike Griffith, Connor Riley. My name is Brandon Adams. Good to have all of you with us, and a huge thanks to our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau for making all of this possible. Georgia Farm Bureau has a history of supporting the agricultural community and the farmers of our great state, and they are showing that all off once again as we head towards Election Day coming up in really just a few days. Georgia Farm Bureau has been big supporters of their campaign called I Farm, I Vote. If you go to the website, ifarmivotega.com. You can find out about all the things that Georgia Farm Bureau is doing to allow the farmers of Georgia to have their voices heard on Election Day, and for those who contribute to the food that we eat on our tables and the things that we enjoy with our families. Those Georgia farmers can check out the website to learn more about the issues facing Georgia's farmers right now, hear interviews with candidates and all the things that are important to farmers as we head towards Election Day, a chance to share their voice, their opinions about how our state needs to operate going forward when it comes to the agricultural landscape. ifarmivotega.com is a great website to go to. Make sure you check that out today. All right, as I said before, in speaking to each of you this week, all of you have kind of expressed your confidence and why you think this will be a Georgia win on Saturday. And really, the best I can tell, I don't know that any of you necessarily expected to be all that close. So I was hoping we could lay that out as part of this show here today about exactly how you think it unfolds in Lexington on Saturday. And Mike, I'll start with you on this. Why do you think Georgia wins easily against Kentucky on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't know how easily. I think their defense is really built to stop Kentucky. Kentucky's a team that likes to run the football. Joey Gatewood now making his first start. That news came out. Very inexperienced quarterback. I think Georgia's going to be able to really pack the line of scrimmage and really force Kentucky into some long down and distance situations. Now, this is a big mobile quarterback with some skills, but I feel like Georgia's built to stop a team like this. And, we talked earlier, will there be a shutout or 10 points or 13? And I think Georgia can muster enough offense with Stetson and their commitment to they've got a renewed commitment to the run game. Kirby said earlier this week, we need to get back to playing our brand of football. And I took that to mean they're going back to smash mouth play action and maybe not quite the pass run ratio we saw against Alabama.
I don't know that it's enough to make a difference in the game one way or another, Mike, but I do think Joey Gatewood's probably a better prospect than Terry Wilson is. I do think he makes Kentucky a little bit more dangerous against a team like Georgia, where you've got, if you're Kentucky, a pretty big deficit in comparison to your opponent. Maybe it doesn't matter this week, but Gatewood starting over Wilson is probably something I assume would happen at some point in time anyway. I think Gatewood's just a better player than Wilson is.
Yeah, Gatewood, it's pretty interesting. Gatewood, actually, remember when we saw him at Auburn, when we saw him as a recruit, we thought he was more of an RPO, run-first type quarterback. But Gatewood, of all people, has been working with the same quarterback trainer as Carson Beck. And a lot of those offseason reports for Gatewood that I heard was that Gatewood was a much improved player, and they were really hoping for that transfer portal clearance. Brendan, my thought on your question is pretty simple. I think Georgia wins this game handily because Kentucky won't have balance against Georgia. That's what we listened to Kirby Smart lecture about all this week, about offensive philosophy, having balance. If you can't throw the ball against Georgia, if you can't give the specter of some really ghosts and goblins outside throwing the ball on Georgia's future NFL corners, I think you're going to have a much harder time running the ball. And I think that's what Kentucky and its fans are in store for, even if they got Eddie Grant at the controls here.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I've said this a lot this week. Styles make fights, and there's a style that Mark Stoops wants to bring to Kentucky, and it's probably the kind of thing that makes Kentucky week to week pretty dangerous against a lot of the other lesser teams in the SEC East. The fact that Stoops wants to instill that physicality, but against a team like Georgia, Connor, that's already physical, all you're really doing is just playing into the hands of what Georgia wants to do. Which is not to say that I think that Georgia goes and runs it 50 times on Saturday against Kentucky. I don't think Georgia wants to do that as a precursor for what it needs to do a little bit next Saturday against Florida. But certainly they like the idea that Kentucky is content to try to play this game on the ground and to do a little bit with Gatewood, what they did with Lindbaum a year ago, and some quarterback runs, some things like that. A very different kind of offense than Georgia faced when it played Alabama 2 weeks ago. This is just the kind of style of team right now that I think that Georgia's going to feast and devour. I don't think it's a coincidence. If you look at what I would say pound for pound is among the most impressive wins for Georgia in the Kirby Smart era at Kentucky in 2018 for a team by which it finished the year ranked in the top 15. Even after they got blown out by Georgia, Kentucky still went on to win games after that, but Georgia absolutely pummeled them in Lexington the last time Georgia played up there in the Commonwealth. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think what Mark Stoops wants to do plays right into the hands of what Kirby Smart is absolutely willing to tolerate.
Hey, Brandon, is Georgia a better team?
Yeah,
than
you mentioned what is the thing that gives.
Sorry, so jump in here, Jeff, and kind of I'll let you finish. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, you just mushroomed a thought for me. Who thinks that is Georgia? Here's a simple question: is Georgia a better team than the one that went in there in that supposed top 10 matchup and beat Lexington back in 2018? Who thinks that Georgia's a better team going up there this week?
I don't think they are right now. They're better defensively than they were in 2018. That team wasn't great at stopping the run, but on balance, I think the 2018 version of Georgia is probably better than this version of Georgia right now. I think that Georgia's better than it was a year ago, but not as good as it was in 2018. Connor, do you agree with that before you make the point that you wanted to make?
Yeah, I think the gap between the 2018 offense and the 2020 offense is greater than the 2020 defense to the 2018 defense. So I probably still pick that 2018 there. As far as the game this weekend, you asked what's the thing that has us most confident. For me, it is how bad this Kentucky offense is. I know there's some people that are high on Joey Gatewood. I don't know if going against this Georgia defense is what you want to be putting a first-time starting quarterback in there against. So with Gatewood, a team that struggled to run the ball last week, their wide receivers are not very good. Going against a defense that I think is mad, is angry, and wants to get better after what happened last week, I think that's a recipe for disaster against Kentucky.
Mike, Jeff asked a pretty good question. You were here in 2018. You covered that team. Based on what you've seen from this Georgia right now compared to the Georgia team that traveled to Lexington 2 years ago, which of these two teams do you think is better right now if you had to compare them side by side?
Boy, that's tough. This defense is really good. It's a little harder to say that after they give up 564 yards against Alabama, but the 2018 they had great balance. I mean, DeAndre Swift was phenomenal. You had NFL receivers and McCole Hardman and Riley Ridley. Jeremiah Holloman was still on the team. I think he would have been key. You had an NFL tight end and Isaac Nauta. You had that really good offensive line. Like I said, the defense was a tick lower than what we see now, but I'd probably take that 2018 team against Kentucky to beat the 2020 team that's going to Kentucky this year.
Yeah, it's also a team, Jeff, that did get better over the course of the season. There was a portion of time in 2018 where you looked at them and wondered, well, how good is this team really? I mean, I would say pound for pound, if I'm going to say that the Kentucky game in 2018 is pound for pound among the best games that Georgia's played, I think you could say pound for pound the LSU game in 2018 might be the very worst game that Georgia has played. And I'm including last year's game against South Carolina in that discussion. Georgia was awful in Baton Rouge in 2018, but clearly got better than that as the season went on. Very impressive performance against Florida, won that game by 19 points. Really, hung with an Alabama team that Georgia was a pretty sizable underdog against going into that game. So if the 2018 team got better over the course of the season, and I think it did, then, what's the opportunity for this? And we'll get more into the specifics of, what this team needs to improve on. But how much of a window do you see for improvement for the 2020 team right now? A little bit like the 18 team that you mentioned.
Brandon, I think the thing is I guess let's be honest. We were doing these shows back in July and August, and we thought, I think every one of us on this panel thought that Georgia would be 3-1 after the Alabama game. We just didn't think Georgia was going to be ripe to go into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. Here's what I'm trying to say here. If we would have known that Georgia would, I'm not even going to dignify that one.
That is a very specific inside joke for people who watch the show each and every week. But you're actually making a good point. I don't want you to lose your train of thought. Go ahead.
So, and here's the thing. Here's what I'm thinking here. If we would have known back then, all of these astute panelists, and you would have said, Georgia's top two options at quarterback perceived are not on the field for the majority of the first half of the season, and your number one receiver is not playing like a number one receiver. I think it's just hard for folks to put those stakes and frame up this season so far and say it's not what Stetson Bennett hasn't been able to do in lifting this offense and beating Alabama. I don't know if the young man gets a lot of credit, especially with the guys around him, to get Georgia in this position where they are today. I don't know if you would have told me no Dwan Mathis, no JT Daniels yet, and then no Jamie Newman yet through week 4, week 5, I would be wondering about how this Georgia team is going to contend for the East.
I think it's really a pretty good point. It's one of the reasons why I've been a lot slower to criticize Stetson Bennett than a lot of other people have, is because if Georgia didn't have Stetson Bennett, I shudder to think where they'd be right now. And I'm not trying to over-dramatize that point. I do think that Georgia would have lost one of these other games that's played thus far had Bennett not played. But, Connor, here's the other thing. If you look at the Georgia schedule, there are probably going to be only 3 games in the regular season where Georgia's favored by fewer than 10 points. 2 of those have already been played. Georgia was an underdog at Alabama, and the game against Florida where Georgia was slightly more than a touchdown favor. Other than that, the Florida game that's going to come up next Saturday, other than that, it's a lot of games where Georgia's going to be a very big favorite, much the way they're going to be on Saturday. I think there's a possibility in which the opinion of Georgia stabilizes some over the course of the next few weeks, because it's going to get to do what some of these other teams have had a chance to do, which is beat up on lesser opponents. Georgia just hasn't had a bunch of that yet. Yes, they had Arkansas. They were favored by 28, won by 27. Yes, they beat up on Tennessee, who, as of right now, does not look to be very good. But the real easy stretch of Georgia's schedule is kind of still on the way. So, rightly or wrongly, the opinion of Georgia may become inflated in a few weeks just because we're seeing them play a slightly easier stripe of competition.
Right. I think we all said at the beginning of the season, could they get through this October stretch, which, yes, even though this game has moved back, it is still October 31st. Could they get through that stretch 4-1? Because they've got that back half of the schedule. They have still, yes, a game against Florida that they're going to need to play well to win in. But you look at this Georgia team, what separates them from all but 3 teams in college football, in my opinion, is they have so much better depth than everyone else. So as these teams start to wear down over the course of a 10-game SEC-only slate, Georgia's going to continue to get better because they're going to have guys that are able to keep everyone fresh. And on top of that, like you point out, they're playing their cupcakes in the back half of their schedule. I know Missouri's looked a little bit more impressive. That's a game Georgia should still win easily. Mississippi State has become a train wreck. Vanderbilt is not even on the tracks anymore. And then you have a South Carolina team who knows what you're getting there week to week. So I think this Georgia team, given the depth and the opponents on the back half, as you point out, does have a chance to sort of change the narrative, I think, around it as the season progresses.
All right, let's cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. So let's talk a little bit more about how they do that. We obviously address quarterback off the top of the program. Georgia, if it is going to be Stetson Bennett at quarterback because JT Daniels just isn't healthy, then obviously he's got to play better. That's a big key for Georgia for improvement over the second half, so it can, A, qualify for an Alabama rematch and then have a better chance of winning once it gets there. But beyond that, Mike, when you look at 6 games to go here, starting on Saturday against Kentucky, what more does Georgia need to improve on beyond quarterback to give it a better chance of beating Alabama when they play again?
I think the receiver play needs to be better. I know Jermaine Burton had 11 targets and only caught 4 passes. He dropped a touchdown pass. The chemistry between him and Stetson, I guess Stetson's the quarterback. I mean, they got to get on the same page. George Pickens has 13 catches in 4 games. He had 12 in the Sugar Bowl. I think you got to try to get your best receiver involved. I still think George is the most talented guy, although I do think Kieris is an NFL guy. I think he's really emerged as a guy I look at and say, yep, I can see this guy really getting better. So, they're really bad in the red zone, right? So Georgia scores less than 60% of the time when they scores touchdowns, less than 60% of the time when they get in the red zone. Florida's at 80%. If you're looking for a recipe for an upset there, it's kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns. So the red zone offense, I think the young receivers need to grow. And I think you need to find a way to get Pickens more involved regardless of who's at quarterback.
This is a very interesting year in that it's not like last year where Georgia was rotating seemingly receivers in every single play. Mike just mentioned 3 receivers. I don't think anybody doubts right now that Georgia's clearly got a separation of a top 3. It is Kieris, it is Burton, it is George Pickens, with apologies to Marcus Rosemy, who I think is knocking on that door of being involved, and Demetrius Robertson, who I've just kind of predicted to break out. It doesn't seem like that's going to quite happen. With apologies to other receivers on Georgia's roster, there has never been, in my mind, a more clear delineation of the top 3 than probably exists right now. Connor, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think you look at a team, and again, I know this is a tired comparison at this point, but LSU last year ago, they largely played those same 3 receivers, Terrence Marshall, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase, almost exclusively. So you can have success not necessarily rotating in there and relying on depth at the wide receiver position, especially if you've got difference makers. For me, coming out of the off week, I am a little interested to see what more we see from Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. He's a guy Kirby Smart talked about a little bit this week. He's a guy who has gotten on the field some, and I'll be interested to see how this off week has sort of helped him become more acclimated and sort of get integrated more into the offense if that is to happen.
Jeff, when Terrence Edwards was on Dog Nation Daily this morning, he brought up an interesting point about George Pickens. He said that he feels like there are too many instances in which Pickens is lining up as the lone receiver in a 3-receiver set, not paired with another receiver on the other side, obviously not giving him someone to kind of rub off of the way that so many of these modern offenses do. I mean, that's one of the things that I do want to see from Georgia going forward. Is there a clever way to scheme Pickens open when we know defenses are trying to take him away? And what happened, Jeff, against Alabama, where good coaching from Alabama put Kearis Jackson in handcuffs, you have got to have a counterpunch on that. I mean, Mike wrote about this at DogNation.com this week. When you look at the target numbers for the Georgia receivers, even after the Alabama game in which, Jackson was bottled up, his total number of targets so much higher than the other receivers. That's just a very comfortable weapon for Stetson Bennett to throw to. Obviously, Pete Golding, Nick Saban, the Alabama coaching staff have access to that same information, and they looked at it and said, okay, let's just get rid of this guy right here, and let's make Georgia beat us somewhere else. And Kearis Jackson was taken out of that Alabama game, had fewer than 30 yards receiving. Jeff, moving forward, that can't happen. You've got to have a counter punch when somebody tries to take Kearis Jackson away. And to go back to Terrence Edwards' point, you've got to be creative about how you find a way to get George Pickens involved in this.
Yeah, right. What was going through my mind when you made that point, and it's a good point by Terrence, is I think a lot of plays Georgia's used George Pickens out there by himself, either to draw coverage or for him to make a play on the ball with a lot of fade routes. Baylor goes through my mind. A lot of his big catches he's made in his career where he was kind of detached and off to the side with Georgia heavy on the other side of the formation. I think it comes down to me to answer this question is funny how we're not talking about the offensive line at all. But it's
we'll get to that, whatever you want to get to, yeah.
Yeah, but to me, it's sort of like what Kirby Smart said this week. I think he stressed this a bunch. It's the guys around Stetson. I think Georgia needs to find some more sizzle. Maybe it's Kendall Milton as a factor back at tailback. Maybe it's Kenny McIntosh healthy. Or Trey McKitty, somebody in that Darnell Washington, somebody at tight end needs to be a security blanket for Stetson Bennett going forward to where you make him look a little bit better. One other thing I'll say is, look at this. You got to remember, new quarterback. Nobody thought Stetson was going to be there. He's not in sync yet with a lot of these guys. New faces everywhere you look. Jermaine Burton, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Kearis Jackson wasn't even a steady contributor last year because of injury. And you've got new quarterback and George Pickens everywhere. So there's a recipe for Georgia to be mediocre on offense and not as productive. I just think the guys around him got to give Stetson Bennett a better chance to win these ball games and look good doing it.
Go ahead, Connor.
And I was just going to say, to Jeff's point there, I know Mac Jones has played really well so far this season, but we all, I think, sort of agree here, especially when in the offseason we were talking about, how soon, not when, or not if, but when Bryce Young comes in and takes that Alabama quarterback job. When you have Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris, even a guy like John Mechie and Miller Forstall that have played well this year, I think that only helps illuminate the point that you need your skill players around you to play well. And to Jeff's point, the skill players right now aren't playing, I think, necessarily up to the potential that they could be.
I want to hear from both Jeff and Connor on their specific area for improvement. A lot of that was reacting to what Mike had said a moment ago. Let me make a quick point, though, and I mentioned this on my show this week, and I want to kind of further this conversation now. When I look specifically at what I want to see from the Georgia defense moving forward, as I've kind of said, defense still matters. I agree with Kirby Smart when he says that. But the definition of national championship defense, I don't think is judged by how few yards you give up, how few points you give up, because we've seen time and time again, that kind of stuff only works against teams that don't score very many points and don't give up, don't gain very many yards. Then in a kind of slugfest against a powerful offense, what really matters defensively is, can you make your own impactful plays, your own negative plays to, as negative plays would suggest, negate what the other side is doing. That means passes broken up. That means sacks, those moments in which you change the fortune of a game. That's what I really want to see Georgia do. I'm not going to judge this Georgia defense by how few yards they give up to Kentucky, because Kentucky doesn't gain yards against anyone, or how few yards they give up against, a lot of the other teams in the schedule. I want to see negative plays. Azeez Ojulari continuing to sack quarterbacks the way that he has. the Georgia secondary that's so good about making quarterbacks not want to throw in their direction. When someone actually does, get up, knock that ball out of the sky, make the impactful play that prevents a passing team from completing a pass on you. That's the area of improvement I'm looking to see. Can Georgia do more impactful plays defensively, not just be stingy against offenses that are not that great at moving the football anyway?
Yeah, I think you saw some of that against Alabama at times. I know they had 3 sacks in the game. I'm not sure on the deflected passes, but I do know they had the interception from Mitchell LeCount of the game's opening play there. But to your point correctly, they have to do it over the course of 4 quarters in every game. They've done, I think, a much better job this season of affecting the pass rusher, of getting their hands on balls. I know Richard LeCount leads the SEC in interceptions right now. Eric Stokes has 2 as well. So they're doing a better job of that. And ultimately, how I think we measure this defense, to the point you bring up, is do they do that against Florida, which is, say we've all said terrible things about them, but their offense at the very least is very good. Do they do it against Florida, and can they do it against Alabama and then potentially the other elite teams, or at least elite offensive teams they play in college football?
Mike, you want to jump in on this? It looks like you do.
Yeah, the thing about sacks and I'm all about that, but not at the expense of giving up 90-yard plays. What I liked about last year's defense was the second half of last season, the last 6 games, they didn't give up a play longer than 40 yards. They were really sound on the back end, but I almost wondered if against Alabama they were doing too much, and then Alabama started running motion, and it looked like Georgia got confused. And when you have broken plays on the back end, that's not good. Now, I don't know if that means that Kirby's getting too complex or too cute, or Sarkisian's just that much of a genius to make Georgia look disorganized. But I don't like sacks at the expense of big plays. I'm a much bigger believer in, hey, make that team drive 12 or 13 yards. Don't give them 40, 50, 70 yards at a time. And I think there's a way to do that. And I do think they're moving towards that.
So let me respond to that, because here's where I think you and I are pretty different. My fear against an Alabama, and I say fear as a fan who wants Georgia to win, or against LSU a year ago, or potentially Clemson in a playoff game, is that you can't shut them out and you can't shut them down. They're going to keep trying for explosive plays. And if they try 10 and hit 3 of them, then all of a sudden, you've got a major issue to deal with, a deficit in that game. See, that's how, to me, the offenses are changing the game. It's not that defenses can't stop offense. It's just that they can't stop them for an entire game, and a couple of explosive plays on the other side just change the nature of the game. Mike, that's why I think Georgia needs those sacks and those impactful defensive plays, because when the other team is trying to strike explosive after explosive after explosive, Georgia may shut down like 80% of them, but if the offense connects on 2 or 3 of them, that's enough to change a game. And I don't know that you can hold an explosive offense to fewer than 2 or 3 explosive plays in a game. There's just not enough evidence to prove that you can.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing to think about is, like Kirby said, you don't want to get in a boat race where you're trading, you're giving up 70-yard plays, and now your offense is back on the field and both teams are getting all these snaps. I think if you make a team execute, it's a lot harder to drive 80 yards on 13 plays than 80 yards on 3 plays. And you give yourself a chance maybe to force a turnover, or maybe, they throw an incompletion and put themselves in 3rd and 13. I don't think Kirby's taking the kind of chances that, he thinks will put himself in a compromised position. But to this point, this defense, as good as they've been celebrated to be, they've given up some explosive plays. We saw that Tennessee hit a couple passes over 30 yards, fades against man coverage. We saw Alabama strike for 90. We saw Arkansas with a 48-yard pass in the first game. They've not been as sound defensively on the back end as I would have expected.
Jeff, where do you want to see improvement for Georgia to have a better chance of beating Alabama?
He's on mute.
Jeff, you're muted.
I've got you. Got it, guys. Thank you. I think I keep coming back to, I think they're going to look better, and I think they're going to play better, but I don't know if they're going to be better. If that doesn't sound a little weird, but they can rip through a lot of these teams, and everybody can think, oh, they're getting this guy rolling. They're getting this guy rolling. They're functioning. They're clicking better. But I think we've said a couple of times here that the schedule is kind of destined for them to look successful and look a little potent, a little bit more potent through the back end. And that may that may coincide with a lot of guys just getting better and getting more comfortable, and Stetson getting more comfortable as well. The thing for me, and it's just going to open everything up for Georgia, if you have to rely on the passing game when the running game is stymied, that's the problem. Because everything Georgia's going to do, play action. I think what Georgia does best right now, according to Kirby Smart, is they're pretty good on third down. They're pretty good on their play action game. So if Georgia's not identifying, getting those good runs from Zamir White, more of that action he had against Alabama than against Tennessee, and Kendall Milton's not making a step forward, or Kenny McIntosh is not making a step forward, or you're not continuing to use James Cook in the passing game like he did against Alabama, the baddest team on the schedule, I think Georgia's got to get their pieces on the board, and they've got to perform as they should.
Connor, how about your area for improvement?
It's just I hate to be this simple. It's just the quarterback play has to be better. They can't turn the ball over. They can't, or whoever it is, they can't turn the ball over. They have to hit on those big plays that I think you saw Alabama hit on time and time again on this past Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to Jeff's point here for a moment, I just think the game has changed. I think you saw last year the trouble that Georgia runs into when they try to use the run to set up the pass. If you don't have the pass, eventually you don't have the run either, because any defense can throw bodies at an offense to stop the running game. It takes a little more than that to stop the passing game. To prevent a team that wants to pass from passing in 2020 is just a hard thing to do. But all it takes is more bodies to stop the running game. And last year we saw DeAndre Swift statistically worse than he had been the previous year. And the Georgia offense really regressed more than it had been the previous year, because using the run to set up the pass, I'm just not quite sure how much that works anymore. I'm not telling you that I want Georgia to be Oklahoma State, because obviously I don't. That's not a recipe for a championship either. But you've got to have, I think, Jeff, that respected passing game to have a chance to run the ball against good teams.
Tell you what better not happen, Brandon. You better not have that game looking like Tennessee, like Georgia, Kentucky 2019 last year, where DeAndre Swift had to pull third downs and magical runs out of his hat to get any Georgia offense. I tell you what, there is a fault line on this Georgia season. And if that game is 7-6 or 10-3 in the third quarter, yowza, then I think a lot of things are wrong with the Georgia football program, and not just the quarterback play and everything else.
Yeah, I think
feel like. Go ahead, Connor. Yeah,
I was thinking that with this Kentucky game, I'll be interested to see, was the Alabama game just an off day? It could have been an off day for the Georgia defense. It could have been an off day for Stetson. Or is it more symptomatic of bigger issues and bigger problems? I think in having the bye week and having time to stew on this and not having a game last week to sort of jump right back into it does make you take a step back and examine this a little bit deeper.
Mike, I'm going to tell you right now, we can't have, and by we, I mean all of us at Dog Nation, we can't have 17-6 on Saturday or 23-19 or some score like that. There's already a lot of tension around this fan base. Georgia needs a good game on Saturday to take some of the air out of that balloon. Otherwise, it's going to be at a fever pitch for all the wrong reasons going into Florida if Georgia doesn't come out and flex a little bit against a Kentucky team that, for me, I just don't think they have much to offer. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, shades of 2018. Remember how they lost to LSU and had that bye week going into Florida, and how angry everybody was. And I kind of feel that, having a week and a half to chew on, or 2 weeks to chew on a loss to Alabama, and having your quarterback throw 3 interceptions and getting shut out in the second half and giving up 564 yards when you're supposed to have the best defense ever. That was embarrassing. That was humbling for Georgia. That wasn't supposed to happen that way. And to your point, I think Connor's brought it up. I think people wanted better answers from Kirby than, well, we're going to teach Stetson to put 2 hands on the ball this week, and we're going to teach him how to make better decisions. I think they wanted more like, Dwan's getting first team reps, and JT Daniels is getting first team reps, and, Kendall Milton's ready for 15 carries in a game. I think people want to turn the page and see some fresh blood and different results out there. So to your point, if there's not different results against Kentucky, you're going to have a lot of fun on Dog Nation Daily every day next week. I can tell you that.
I'm not going to want to come to work. I think that's probably more the case. By the way, speaking of comments, we'll take some of yours in a moment as we go cover more to let you address the topics that are on your mind here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Before that, though, let me just squeeze this in here really quick. Saturday kind of officially starts the second half of the season for the SEC. Not Georgia's halfway point yet. They don't play their fifth game until Saturday, but it is the sixth week in the SEC for a lot of other teams. And so I kind of want to go around the horn. We do this every couple of weeks here. Just kind of a snapshot of where the SEC is right now. Just give me a hot take. Give me something about the league that you expect to see unfold more in the second half. Connor, I'll let you go first.
I want to see how lucky Auburn can continue to get. I want to see how wedged up the horseshoe is into their behind there. They have, I think everyone here would say they are lucky to be 3-2, the record that they are right now. But if you follow the college football history, and Mike knows it better than anyone, sometimes this Auburn team, they just get a lot of lucky bounces. And I'll be interested to see over the course of this season how things go there. And maybe a little bit more interesting, how Bo Nix continues to develop, because if he doesn't and he looks like the player he has the first half of the season, Gus Malzahn is going to run into a lot of problems, I think.
I think Auburn wins on Saturday, Connor. I do.
I think I agree, but I don't think it's pretty. I think it's like what was the score someone threw out, 23-19?
Yeah.
I think it's something like that. I think it's an ugly win, and that, well, maybe a win over LSU might satisfy some fans. If Bo Nix doesn't show improvement, that's the real scary thing there for Auburn.
Mike, how about you? Give me a hot take for the second half of the season here.
Well, I mean, I'm watching Tennessee because they came into this season an 8-game win streak and top 2 recruiting class, and the Vols were back, and now they play Arkansas. And I'll tell you, this is the strangest fan base. I compliment. This is the only fan base where when you compliment their players, they attack you and say, "No, he's not good. He's horrible." You know, and I said, Jared Garantano's probably better than y'all think. He's 11-13. He led Georgia at the half. No, he's awful. And there's just, I see an implosion coming. If they lose to Arkansas and Sam Pittman and lose to Auburn and go 3-5, what's going to be going on up there? What will happen to their recruiting class? Could there be some flips? They do have some decent guys. So just kind of, I like to watch what happens in the East. Missouri stomping Kentucky. That wasn't supposed to happen. I thought Kentucky had made a statement that they were the number 3 team. So I like watching the East. I want to see what happens with Florida. So I'm all about, and then this Alabama team, I think we saw their best game. I don't think they can possibly play any better than they did against Georgia. I mean, Najee with 31 carries. Is there going to be another game where he carries 31? Is Mac going to be that on point? There is no more Waddle. So I guess I'm kind of looking at to see Alabama, to see what happens with them. Hot take, I guess we're going to see, I'm like everybody else, Sam Pittman. Can Arkansas really keep winning? So far, all they've done is beat the Mississippi schools when you get right down to it.
Mike, you know why Missouri has beat Kentucky and has surprised a lot of people as well, right? You know the reason, right?
No.
Their starting quarterback, Connor Beasley. I mean, you can't lose with a guy like Connor leading your team. I mean, it's just simple facts and simple math here.
It's also fair to point out that Missouri's last 2 wins also came in schedule change games. The date for the Missouri-Kentucky game got changed. The venue for the Missouri-LSU game got changed. So interesting to see Missouri on the road on Saturday against a team that knows it's preparing for them. We'll see how the Tigers travel in Gainesville on Saturday.
This Florida game, though, is also technically a schedule change game.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
So we'll find out.
That's a good point. Maybe they'll keep riding that. Jeff, you got a hot take for us for the SEC second half here?
Yeah, I thought about this. I think I got a kind of appetizer of things. One, which team is going to fall farther, South Carolina or Tennessee? Which one has the deeper crevice, the deeper valley for this season, South Carolina or Tennessee? I think LSU is going to get a little bit better over the course of this fall. My third point, my last point, is I really think Florida's a one-trick pony. I think Kyle Pitts to Kyle Trask, a little bit of Kadarius Toney, that's their entire offense. They're going to do that well. They're going to beat everybody on their schedule by about 7 to 14 points, except for that team they face in Jacksonville.
So here's my hot take, and I've been kind of on this for a while now. Watch out for Texas A&M running the table and going 9-1. I agree. I think that is very much in play for an Aggies team that is not perfect. There's a lot about that Aggies team that is not perfect. But after playing a brutal schedule year after year after year, schedule is now favorable for Texas A&M. Saturday's a big day. against an Arkansas team that, as Mike said, all they've done is beaten the Mississippi teams, but they gave Georgia a heck of a run for a half. Arkansas will tell you they should have beaten Auburn if not for, a truly horrible officiating call at the end. And I am of the belief that in College Station on Saturday, Texas A&M shows how much it's grown up. I think they handle Arkansas by the 2 touchdowns, and I think they're on a little bit of a run after that. If it doesn't happen against Arkansas on Saturday, if that's a close game, then obviously it becomes difficult to maintain that streak the rest of the way. But watch out for Texas A&M going 9-1 in a year in which I think that 4th playoff team is going to get a lot of discussion. A&M is not going to win the West, but the last SEC team that made the playoff as a second SEC team didn't win their division either. Watch out for Texas A&M. I think their story is far from told here so far.
So you're saying, BA, you're saying you don't think we could see a 5-0 Wisconsin get in there? And as for Arkansas, I got to say this. The only headline that was worse than my Georgia quarterback change for Kentucky headline tonight was when ESPN said Arkansas had a near upset against Georgia. That was the worst headline of the year. Near upset? What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
It was 37-10. So thank goodness, like I said. What about that? And BA, I want to throw it back to you. You mentioned playoffs, so I got to take us there. What's going to happen if the Big Ten has teams playing 6 and 7 games and undefeated? Could we see somebody? Could 7-0 Oregon? Could 6-0 Wisconsin? Do you guys have faith the playoff committee will put 2 SEC teams in there?
I think there's a chance that 2 SEC teams make it, but I agree with you that the bias always exists with getting more leagues involved. They want college football to be a national sport. And I mean, I hate to be so cynical about this, but as long as Ohio State plays all of its games, then everything's going to be fine. What throws the monkey wrench in all of this is if Ohio State starts missing some games. I'm not as cynical on this as some people are, but there are people who've said the entire purpose of the Big Ten returning this year was to just give Ohio State a chance to win a national championship. So Wisconsin, who's not in the same realm of team as Ohio State, not a bad team, I don't think, but not in the same realm of Ohio State, them missing a game against Nebraska on Saturday is not a calamity from the Big Ten standpoint. It's only when the Buckeyes start missing games, or if somehow Ohio State stumbles in a game. It's only when that happens if a real issue comes. If you've got a handful of Big Ten teams that don't play, but a half dozen games or something like that, I think they'll just shrug their shoulders and move on as long as Ohio State gets to play its games. You guys agree?
Hey guys, I do. I think that's the national conscience and everybody caretaking for the Buckeyes. I know Brandon likes to kick the tires on that a whole lot. Brandon, I had one final SEC take that I wanted
Please.
to let me say buy or sell on this point. Raise your hand here if you believe that there will only be 2 teams in the SEC with 2 losses or fewer by the time the season is over.
No, I think there'll be more than that.
I'm not ready.
I think there'll be more than that.
You think there'll be more with an 8-2 record or better?
I think there'll be 2 in the East and 2 in the West. I mean, listen.
Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M, Alabama. Is that what you're saying there?
For as much as I've criticized Dan Mullen, and last year I said I thought Mullen was going to finish unranked. To his credit, Florida is good against bad teams. Now, as a favorite against Texas A&M, they didn't win, but like Missouri on Saturday is not the kind of team that trips up Florida right now. The rest of these ham and eggers in the SEC East, they are not tripping up Florida. I don't think Florida's gonna lose to any of the bad teams. I think they've at least turned the corner on that.
It just continues to not give Connor Beasley any chance, but that's okay. Us Connors, we're used to being an underdog. We like being in that position. I like what Missouri might be able to come out and do, especially, again, it's a Florida team. They're really maybe the first team, again, Vanderbilt also this weekend, where they're probably some of the first, at least big Power 5 teams to have their seasons essentially shut down for a couple of weeks and sort of see how they might look. Whereas this is a Missouri team that they're playing their best football. They beat LSU 3 weeks ago. They had a bye week. They beat Kentucky last week. I think with Florida this weekend, one of the things I'm interested in is really seeing what kind of an impact COVID had on that team. And because they weren't practicing for 2 weeks, they only started practicing again on Monday, and sort of seeing where this team as a whole is, especially with a game against Georgia next week.
We're going to take some comments and get ready to wrap up. But Mike, respond to that right quick. What do you think the layoff does for Florida? Makes them rusty? Makes them sharper defense?
I've got breaking news here.
Okay.
Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network is reporting that Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence has tested positive for COVID-19.
Wow, that is huge news.
DJ Ungale, that's another 5-star waiting in the wings.
So do they play
Notre Dame next Saturday, by the way?
So here's my question. Are we going to make sure or find out if there's more Clemson guys that test positive so they don't have to play that Notre Dame game?
Well, they do have a bye week for December 12th that they can potentially move either the Boston College game this weekend or the Notre Dame game. But yeah, it's obviously a very big concern now.
So there's a chance they could play. I mean, we're getting way cart in front of the horse, but if the game had to be changed because of that, you could talk about the potential of a Notre Dame Clemson 2 weeks in a row.
Well, and here's what else you could have happen. What if Notre Dame plays Clemson without Trevor Lawrence, beats them, and then Clemson wins out and doesn't play in the ACC championship and Notre Dame does? You could have 2 ACC teams in there.
So I'll admit, I don't understand this. If UNC finishes 1 loss, who does not play Clemson in the regular season, if Clemson, based on Mike's scenario, finishes 1 loss, how would you determine which of those 2 teams made the ACC championship game? I have zero idea.
It's winning percentage against the highest ranked team in the conference. So Notre Dame, let's say in this scenario, Notre Dame goes undefeated, Clemson has 1 loss to Notre Dame, and North Carolina has the 1 loss to Florida State. Because Clemson lost to Notre Dame and thus has a losing record against the top team in the conference, whereas North Carolina does not, North Carolina would go instead of Clemson.
Okay.
He's gonna lose another.
I'm gonna have to rewind the tape and listen to that again. I think Dabo will play without Trevor Lawrence. We have seen some teams this year who have, and by the way, I think we've seen one of even those, this week. But we've seen some teams choose to cancel a game when they didn't technically have to. I don't think Dabo will duck Notre Dame without Clemson. My prediction is, unless the outbreak extends beyond Trevor Lawrence, Jeff, I believe Clemson plays Notre Dame next Saturday.
I believe you could take Travis Etienne off the team. You could take Trevor Lawrence off the team. You could take a defensive back, a defensive lineman, an offensive lineman, and a wide receiver to be named later. I think Clemson still has the horses to beat Notre Dame.
It'll be Bring Your Guts Part 2. That's the famous Dabo phrase from a previous Notre Dame game. I think they'll do that again. All right, let's do a couple comments. We'll get ready to get out of here. Connor, thanks for breaking that in the show. I really appreciate that. And good job by Rap Sheet for doing a little college football breaking news here as well. John Williams Adams says, sorry for Trevor. Hope he is well soon. He will not be the only one, being a quarterback around many. And obviously we've already dealt with some of this, including the Graham Mertz, is that his name? The Wisconsin quarterback?
Graham Mertz.
Yeah. So again, it's by far the only one for sure. Henry Brooks says, all I know is we have one of the best defenses Georgia's ever had in a long time. It would be sad if this season, doesn't end up being what it's supposed to be because of that. And yeah, listen, I mean, I think the theme of the show, I would hope, Jeff, is a little bit of optimism, right? I mean, Georgia has a chance to still do a lot of the things that it wants to do. It does need improvement, and a lot of you were really good about chronicling all the areas in which it needs to get better. But this is not a white flag of surrender for me at any point in time. I'm ready to go along the ride. It's going to be bumpy at times. Maybe the Kentucky game on Saturday is not quite as pretty as I want it to be. Even if it's not, I'm still buckling my chin strap and getting ready for Florida the following week. I haven't given up on this season, not by a long shot.
I think beauty pageant wins would probably be important for the program this week. But as Clemson fans are dealing with right now, I think it's a reality of, maybe the SEC does it a little bit differently than other leagues in terms of their antigens and the way they're testing and they're protecting their players. But somebody knock on wood, everybody knock on wood. Imagine this Georgia football team with a COVID-19 size starter scare like Trevor Lawrence is given the Clemson faithful right now. Wouldn't that be an interesting way, Mike Griffith, for Georgia to get a different quarterback in there or a different options of some of the playmaker abilities? I mean, stranger things have happened and stranger things might happen in the year 2020.
How could you speak that into existence?
Well, and here's my $1 million question. What if Georgia gets hit with COVID the week of the Florida game? Where do you put that game? Because Florida's already used up the December 12th date, right?
I think the conference office will do
But
whatever's in the best.
But that's like
interest of
Vanderbilt or somebody, though, right? I'll just tell Vanderbilt, listen, y'all play yourself. Well, the men have got something they got to take care of on December the 12th.
Or maybe just eliminate like I said, I'm serious. I don't think I'm still saying it, guys. I don't think Vanderbilt's going to finish the year. I think that program's going to opt out. I don't think we're going to see a Georgia Vanderbilt game.
It's really one of the reasons why people thought I was joking when I said this. I would have front-loaded the schedule with Georgia, Florida, the game that you have to play. Heaven forbid the season will ever be put in jeopardy. At least give me Georgia, Florida head-to-head so some of that stuff can be settled a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, you just sort of cross your fingers each week and you hope it keeps going well. Let me get one or two more comments and we'll get ready to leave. Keith Simmons says, when is Arian Smith coming back? Obviously, Mike, this is a guy that's still trying to work his way back into form, but that speed that Smith could potentially provide is clearly something that Georgia needs.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question you want a guy like that can stretch the field out. I'd hope that maybe we'd see him by this week and he'd have a warm-up game, but Kirby didn't mention it, and I suppose we're remiss. I didn't ask about it. I did ask about Pickens. I know that there was some reports out there earlier that he was in a non-contact jersey, and Kirby said yesterday that, just a little dinged up, thinks he'll be fine. But, at this stage, I just don't know if we can expect Arian Smith to be an impact player having missed this much of the season. I could be wrong, but
I think you're right. I think you're probably right. Last one, this comes from Thomas Tyson on YouTube. We'll go around the horn on this. If Stetson Bennett does not perform well, and if we assume that JT Daniels is not healthy, Connor, does Juan Mathis deserve another look? Just give me a short answer.
Yeah, if Stetson Bennett proves ineffective and JT's not ready, he has to be the guy. And, part of life is overcoming adversity. He didn't play very well the first time he did against Arkansas, but if he's granted a second chance, a second opportunity, I think Georgia has no choice but to put him in there.
Mike, how about you real quick on that topic?
He deserves it, but you'd have to change the offense. And I just don't know if this far into the season you're willing to flip the script for the offense, especially if you think that JT could be close to being ready in the next week or two.
Jeff?
I think Mathis is good enough to beat everybody on the schedule except for Florida. I think the games would be a lot tighter. I think Georgia would have to do things differently. I don't think that would be ultimately a long game win for Georgia, depending on how much he develops. Got to remember, though, that big ball he threw to Pickens against Arkansas, that thing is about, 16 centimeters to the left. Well, that's a huge jolt of confidence for him right there. And we wonder what might have happened to the start of the 2020 season. In short, I think Dwan can win a lot of these games, especially as close to the vest as Kirby Smart and Todd Monken might play it.
We will leave it there for now. Thanks for being here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, and thanks for the Cover More contributions with your comments. Fun way to discuss that. I'll have Jeff Sintel tomorrow morning on Dog Nation Daily. There's a lot of big recruiting news for Georgia this weekend. We will hit a lot of that on the 2021 and 2022 side on Dog Nation Daily tomorrow. And of course, Connor Riley and Mike Griffith will have great coverage as the Dogs get ready to head up to Lexington, Kentucky for a game against those Wildcats coming up Saturday afternoon. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Enjoy the football. Thanks for being here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. We'll see you back here again next week at this very same time.